The lab was too clean, too quiet, and far too cold for comfort. The fluorescent lights reflected off the polished steel surfaces, glaring and harsh, as if accusing me of some unseen crime. I was Annelise, a biochemist whose life had been devoted to formulas, compounds, and precision. Today, my brilliance had become my vulnerability. I felt the prick of the custom-designed compound as it coursed through my veins. Paralyzed. Conscious, but powerless. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very hands I had trusted, the hands I had spent countless nights guiding through the delicate movements of pipettes and petri dishes, were the hands that had betrayed me. Duncan stood over me, his expression immaculate, the calm of a man entirely convinced of his own cleverness. The neat lines of his lab coat did nothing to hide the malice in his eyes. "The patent belongs to the originator, Annelise," he said, voice low and cold. "And I refuse to share the credit with someone who questions my methodology. The public will believe this is a tragic accident. Your acute allergic reaction, unfortunate, but ultimately convenient." I could hear the smooth scrape of his gloves against the counter, smell the faint antiseptic scent mingled with the chemical aromas that had been my life's work. He had spent years studying me, watching me, waiting for the moment he could exploit my trust. The realization hit me with the precision of a scalpel. My genius had been weaponized against me. And yet, even as my body betrayed me, my mind remained painfully alert. I catalogued every thought, every observation, every vial on the shelf, every assay on the bench, everything Duncan had overlooked, everything I would need to use if I was given a second chance. I remembered the formula, the breakthrough that could have revolutionized Pinnacle Bio. It wasn't just a patent, it was years of discovery, painstaking experiments, late nights, and endless trial and error. And now it would become the tool of Duncan's ego. My work, my reputation, my life, all reduced to fodder for his ambition. I felt anger rise first as a searing heat, then as a cold, calculating clarity. If I could return, I wouldn't just survive, I would ensure that every move Duncan made would be turned against him. Every misstep he had hidden under his charm and smooth words would be catalogued, exposed, and corrected. And then, with the cruel finality of inevitability, I died. Conscious, aware, furious. The lab, once a place of creation and wonder, became my tomb. The fluorescent lights seemed to dim, the hum of the machinery fading to silence. But I did not panic. I did not cry. I remembered one truth. Knowledge is power. And even in death, I had a plan. The last thought that crossed my mind as darkness claimed me was this: if I am given a second chance, Duncan's arrogance will be his undoing. His fragile, inflated ego will lead him into traps he cannot foresee. And I, Annelise, will orchestrate it all. His empire of deceit will crumble, not through brute force, but with the precision of the science I have always mastered. I would return, and when I did, the formula for his ruin would be catalyzed by nothing more than his own ambition and the truth I alone carried. The smell of burnt espresso and cheap conference carpet hit me before I even opened my eyes. It was familiar, mundane, shockingly alive. My heart pounded hard, too hard for someone who had just died. I gasped, clutching the styrofoam cup in my hand, the warmth bleeding into my palm like a promise. I wasn't in the lab. I wasn't paralyzed. I wasn't dead. I was 25. The date on the conference badge pinned crookedly to my blouse read, August 10th, 2015. Dr. Annelise Hartman, guest lecturer. My stomach twisted. This was the first conference where I had presented my independent research, the work that would eventually catch Duncan's attention. The work that had started everything. But now, I was here with a mind decades older, sharpened by betrayal and death. I stood still for a moment, stabilizing my breath, anchoring myself in this strange second chance. Around me, academics buzzed from booth to booth, clutching poster tubes, debating theories, trying to impress one another. Once, this place had intimidated me. Now, it felt laughably small. I had come back for a reason, and I knew exactly where to start. Rhys, Duncan's scientific rival. The man Duncan mocked relentlessly for being overly cautious, painfully ethical, too slow to matter. But I remembered the truth. Rhys was brilliant. More brilliant than Duncan by a mile. And unlike Duncan, he had a moral compass. In my past life, he had been a thorn in Duncan's side. In this life, he would become my shield and my ally. I entered the lecture hall where Rhys was presenting. He stood at the podium, dark hair slightly mussed, sleeves rolled up, explaining a problem that had plagued researchers for almost a decade. Duncan had dismissed this very work as useless. But I had built my breakthrough on the foundation Rhys had laid. He didn't know it yet, but Rhys Varga had given me the cornerstone of the formula Duncan would later kill me for. When the session ended, I didn't wait for the crowd to disperse. I approached him directly, heart steady, purpose sharp as a scalpel. "Dr. Varga," I said. He turned, eyes bright, intelligent, and suspicious. "Yes, I have a solution for the protein fold stability issue in your paper." He blinked. "That's impossible. It's one of the biggest unsolved variables." I opened my notebook and wrote the simplified version of the solution, the version he could actually process without knowing the future. Rhys froze. His hand tightened on his pen. "This equation, this shouldn't be possible without years of experimental confirmation." "It is possible," I answered softly. "You just couldn't reach it yet because you didn't have the right reagent conditions." He searched my face, trying to categorize me. "Who are you?" "I'm Annelise. And I'm offering you the truth, data untainted by corporate greed. But there's something I need in return." "And what's that?" His voice had lowered, cautious, calculating, but curious. "Your commitment to ethical science. No shortcuts. No suppressed data. No manipulation." "Duncan." I swallowed the bitterness. "Duncan compromises everything he touches." Rhys's jaw tightened at the name. They had always been rivals, two brilliant minds, one corrupted by ambition, the other grounded by integrity. "He'll try to recruit me soon," I continued. "He'll try to charm you into collaboration later, after he steals my work. He will rush trials. He will falsify data. He will risk lives." Rhys's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and something far sharper. "And you're asking me to oppose him?" "I'm asking you," I said steadily, "to help me make sure the truth wins this time." Silence stretched between us, thick with potential energy. I had given him something impossible, something valuable, something dangerous. He closed the notebook gently, his fingers brushing mine. Not intimately, but with a seriousness that felt like a vow. "You have my attention, Annelise," he said. "And my commitment, if what you say proves true." "It will," I replied. For the first time since my death, I felt the faint, dizzying sensation of hope. Not naive hope, strategic hope, calculated hope. The kind of hope built on the strongest reagent of all, the truth. The lab smelled of antiseptic and burnt coffee, a constant reminder of the nights we had spent chasing perfection. I watched Rhys move between benches with a precision I had come to admire, his hands steady, methodical, never hurried, always exact. Every movement spoke of care, of patience, of integrity. In him, I saw the antithesis of Duncan, disciplined, cautious, ethical. And I knew that, together, we could dismantle the web he had spun. I stood over a set of vials, checking concentrations and cross-referencing notes, while Rhys adjusted a microscope. "The new compound stability is holding at 97% under stress tests," he murmured, barely looking up. His voice was low, calm, precise, and in its steadiness, it grounded me. I remembered my previous life, the betrayal, the paralysis, the suffocating certainty of my own death. But now I was alive. I had the advantage of foresight. Every misstep Duncan had taken was already catalogued in my mind. Every shortcut, every reckless shortcut, every attempt at intellectual theft, he was predictable. And we were ready. Duncan, ever ambitious and arrogant, tried to lure me back into his orbit with offers of immediate partnership and promises of fame. I allowed him to visit, to flaunt his charm, but I stayed within the orbit of Rhys, the man whose ethics were as rigid as my own. Every time Duncan tried to influence me, I made careful, strategic decisions to expose his flawed methodology to the scientific community. We designed experiments together, each test, each control, meticulously documented and peer-reviewed before submission. Where I brought knowledge, foresight, and the instinct of survival, Rhys brought the discipline and rigor Duncan would never respect. The combination was unstoppable. One night, the lab was silent except for the hum of the incubators and the soft tapping of a keyboard. I leaned over a series of analytical charts, tracing the degradation patterns of a compound. Rhys's presence behind me was quiet but insistent. "You're overworking," he said softly, almost as a suggestion rather than a critique. "I can't stop," I admitted. "Not yet. Not until Duncan's corruption is fully undone." He placed a hand lightly on my shoulder, steady, reassuring. I could feel the warmth through my lab coat. Not commanding, not demanding, simply anchoring. "You're the reason this work succeeds," he said, his voice low. "You see the whole picture. I just help make sure the pieces hold together." In that moment, the intimacy of shared purpose deepened subtly. Hours of working side by side, pouring every ounce of ourselves into the work, had forged a bond far stronger than simple attraction. It was trust, respect, and understanding, building quietly, irrevocably. The final trial came swiftly. Duncan attempted to present a hastily completed compound, cutting corners and ignoring safety protocols. We were ready. With meticulous documentation, ethical review, and precise experimental data, Rhys dismantled his presentation point by point, exposing the flaws scientifically and publicly. Duncan's face twisted in disbelief, then fury. "You," he began, but the panel ignored him. The evidence was irrefutable. His reputation crumbled before my eyes. As the room emptied, leaving only us and the lingering antiseptic, I turned to Rhys. His eyes met mine, soft, proud, and honest. Without hesitation, he stepped closer, taking my face gently in his hands. His kiss was deliberate, tender, and grounding, a quiet celebration of shared triumph and the bond forged in fire and ethics. Years later, our lab became the world's most trusted center for ethical biochemistry research. And while the fame of our discoveries was immense, the true victory was personal, a life built together, rooted in integrity, intellect, and trust. Rhys's hand brushed mine across the lab bench, dusted with chemical residue, and I knew that, in him, I had found not just a partner in science, but a partner in life. The lab lights flickered faintly, the hum of the fume hoods mixing with the low tick of the wall clock. Even after months of perfecting our compound, I couldn't shake the lingering sense that Duncan's shadow still lingered, stalking our every step. I was Annelise, alive, aware and furious, and yet every instinct told me that victory was still fragile. One wrong move and decades of careful calculation could unravel. Rhys moved methodically at the bench opposite me, carefully measuring reagents with a precision that made my pulse slow in admiration. There was a rhythm to him, a quiet confidence that both grounded and inspired me. It wasn't just his competence. It was the integrity with which he approached every molecule, every assay, every tiny, crucial variable. In a world corrupted by ambition, he was a constant I could rely on. "You're quiet tonight," he said, glancing up with an intensity that made my heart stutter. "Not working on the latest set of trials." "I'm thinking," I admitted, "about Duncan, about the vulnerabilities we've already exposed, and the ones we haven't yet considered. He's relentless, and he knows how to exploit weakness." Rhys's expression darkened, but it wasn't anger, it was focus. "Then we stay ahead. We anticipate. We don't let him dictate the terms of our work." I looked at him across the lab bench. The way his jaw was set, the slight furrow between his brows, the careful attention to every tiny action, it was as if his entire being was a shield, and I had become part of the inner circle of that shield. The thought made my chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with chemicals or formulas. "Rhys," I whispered, almost to myself, Do you ever wonder what happens after all of this? When the compound is stable, the patents are secured, and Duncan is dealt with. He paused, a pipette hovering midair. His dark eyes met mine, steady and unwavering. I do. But I'm not sure I can imagine it without you being part of it. Something shifted then, subtle but undeniable. Not a kiss, not a declaration yet. But the air between us thickened, charged, like the moment just before a reaction goes critical. Our hands brushed over a shared reagent bottle, a fleeting touch that sent a shiver up my spine. The chemistry of our proximity was more intense than any formula we had ever created. Our work continued, but the emotional undertone had changed. Every late-night session, every meticulous experiment carried the unspoken awareness that we were building more than just compounds and peer-reviewed papers. We were building trust, reliance, and a tentative closeness that had nothing to do with science, yet everything to do with us. And then Duncan made his move. Through a confidential leak, he attempted to compromise a batch of our research by tampering with a minor but critical reagent. It was subtle, nearly undetectable. But I noticed immediately, my memory of the previous timeline sharp as a scalpel. "Rhys," I said sharply, pointing to the anomaly in the chromatograph. "He's trying to introduce a variable, one that would invalidate weeks of work if unnoticed." Rhys leaned over, scanning the data. A small, satisfied smile crept across his face. "And thanks to your foresight, we catch it in time. Just like always." As we corrected the batch together, our shoulders brushing in the narrow space, I felt an undeniable warmth radiate between us. Not overt, not bold, but a quiet acknowledgement that we were aligned in every sense: intellect, purpose, and something far more human. By the time the lab was empty, the night deep and still, we had secured the integrity of the compound once again. Rhys lingered by my workstation, not leaving, not speaking. There was no kiss yet, no declaration, but a shared glance, a gentle tilt of the head, spoke volumes. In that moment, I realized that our connection, forged in the fire of betrayal and rigor of science, was evolving. The catalyst wasn't just chemicals, it was trust, respect, and the slow, undeniable pull of something neither of us could fully name yet. Duncan could wait. For now, Rhys and I had chemistry far more dangerous, and infinitely more rewarding, than anything in a test tube. The lab was quieter than usual, almost eerily so. The hum of the fume hoods and the distant tick of the wall clock seemed louder in the absence of distraction. I was Annelise, alert, vigilant, and more determined than ever. Duncan was still out there, scheming, and I knew his arrogance would make him careless. I just had to be ready. Rhys was at the workstation opposite me, meticulously analyzing the latest batch of compounds. His concentration was palpable, every movement deliberate, almost ritualistic. Watching him work, I felt a quiet admiration that had begun to edge towards something deeper, a pull that went beyond professional respect. "Annelise," he said softly, breaking the silence. "I've cross-referenced the stability data. If we integrate your predictive model with my recalibrations, we'll have a compound that's immune to his tampering. Completely foolproof." I glanced up, meeting his eyes. There was something in his gaze, intense, unwavering, patient, that made my heart beat faster than any experiment ever could. "Then we do it," I said, my voice steady, hiding the rush of anticipation I felt whenever we were this close. The work was intricate, each step a dance of precision and timing. As our hands moved almost in unison over the same instruments, I felt the subtle friction of connection, our fingers brushing, a shared glance over the data readouts, the occasional quiet laugh when something surprisingly worked on the first try. It was unspoken, restrained, but undeniably present. Then the inevitable happened. A notification lit up the secure network, an attempt to access our research from an external source. My stomach tightened. "Duncan." "He's here," I said, voice low but firm. Rhys immediately scanned the intrusion logs. "He's trying to manipulate the formula. Minimal traces but aggressive. He wants to corrupt the entire dataset." Together, we sprang into action, our movements fluid, synchronized, a silent understanding that we were united in purpose. Every keystroke, every recalibration, every protective measure reinforced the bond that had been quietly building between us. There was urgency in our proximity, the adrenaline of defending our work creating a current that neither of us could ignore. Hours passed, the lab bathed in the pale glow of monitors and overhead lights. By the time the intrusion was neutralized, I was exhausted, yet exhilarated. My shoulders ached, my mind raced, but there was a warmth beside me that had nothing to do with chemistry. Rhys's hand brushed mine over the keyboard as he leaned back, a subtle, unspoken acknowledgement of the closeness that had grown between us. "Annelise," he said quietly, his voice low and certain. "We make a good team. Not just here in the lab, but in everything we fight for. I trust you. I trust you completely." My chest tightened at the weight of his words. "And you," I whispered, feeling the gravity of everything we had survived. Duncan's betrayal, the near loss of our work, and the constant battle to stay ahead. More than anyone else. There was no dramatic kiss yet, no bold declaration, just the lingering awareness of the connection that had grown stronger with each shared night, each painstaking experiment. The chemistry between us, both literal and metaphorical, was undeniable. And I knew that when the time was right, it would be more than subtle touches and fleeting glances. Duncan's shadow still loomed, threatening, relentless. But in the quiet aftermath of the ethical collision, I realized that Rhys was no longer just an ally. He was a safe harbor in the storm, a partner who understood the stakes, the risks, and, perhaps most importantly, the person I had become. As I leaned back, rubbing tired eyes, I glanced at him. His hand hovered near mine again, just above the edge of the workstation. It was a promise, unspoken but unmistakable. And I knew that together, we could not only defend the integrity of our science, but also explore the depths of a connection that had grown alongside it. The lab was alive with a quiet, tense energy, the kind that comes before the most critical breakthroughs, or the most devastating failures. I was Annelise, eyes glued to the monitors, mind running through every possible scenario. Duncan's shadow loomed larger than ever. His last intrusion attempt had been clumsy but telling. He was learning, adapting, and growing more dangerous. Rhys was at my side, his presence steady, like the anchor I didn't know I needed. He was reviewing the latest data, his fingers moving with precision and grace over the keyboard. I noticed the subtle line of tension in his jaw, the small furrow between his brows as he focused. It struck me again how different he was from Duncan. Calm, ethical, deliberate. There was a warmth in that steadiness, a quiet magnetism that drew me closer without a single word. "We need a countermeasure that's both preemptive and irreversible," Rhys said, his voice low but intense. "If Duncan tries to manipulate the next batch, we can trap his signature and neutralize any effect before it starts." I nodded, heart racing, not from fear, but from the thrill of working in perfect synergy with him. "We'll need to integrate the new stabilizers with the predictive model. It has to be seamless, even the smallest gap, and he'll exploit it." Hours passed in near silence, broken only by the faint hum of machinery and the click of keyboards. We moved with the precision of seasoned partners, our hands brushing occasionally, fingers accidentally, or perhaps intentionally, lingering near each other. Each touch sent a subtle spark, a reminder that this partnership was more than professional. Then the alert came. Duncan had attempted another breach. This time, it was aggressive, fast, and sophisticated. He wasn't testing the waters anymore. He was striking. My pulse quickened. "Ready?" I asked, meeting Rhys's eyes. There was a flicker of something unspoken in that glance, a recognition of the stakes, yes, but also something personal, intimate, tethered to the countless hours we'd spent side by side. "Always," he replied, his tone firm, yet soft in a way that made my chest tighten. We attacked the intrusion together, our minds perfectly aligned. Every line of code I wrote, every adjustment he made, moved us closer to safety. And yet, in the midst of the crisis, I felt the undeniable pull between us. Our hands brushed over the same keyboard, shoulders pressed lightly together as we leaned in toward the monitors, breaths synchronizing in a subtle rhythm that mirrored the urgency of the moment. Finally, the breach was contained. Duncan's attempt had failed spectacularly, leaving behind clear evidence of his tampering. The relief was immense, but so was the tension between us. I turned to Rhys, and without thinking, my hand found his. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the weight of everything, the betrayals, the near-death experiences, the constant vigilance, dissolved into something quieter, deeper. "You always know the right move," he said softly, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "Not just here in the lab, in everything." I felt heat rise in my cheeks, my heart catching at the intimacy of his tone. "And you," I replied, voice barely above a whisper, "always see the truth, even when it's hard to face." He leaned a fraction closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. "We're a good team," he murmured, the words heavy with unspoken emotion. "In every sense." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I let my hand linger in his, savoring the rare moment of connection that had grown steadily beneath the surface of our professional partnership. There was no dramatic confession, no rush, just the shared understanding that we had survived together, that we trusted each other completely, and that something deeper was inevitable. Outside, Duncan's presence still threatened, but inside the lab, with Rhys beside me, I felt unbreakable. He wasn't just my ally in science. He was becoming my anchor in a world of betrayal, my steady hand in the chaos, and perhaps the catalyst for a truth far more personal than any formula could reveal.